Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So once again, thank you so much for joining. Last week, we had completed the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And in terms of a revision, I'd like to start by asking you some questions. And as usual, if you could raise your hands before answering and keep the answer within 60 seconds, if possible. So, can somebody tell me what is the main theme of the 7th chapter? Anant Acharya Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. So the main theme of 7th chapter is the knowledge of the Absolute. So Krishna starts to explaining about his knowledge, the material, his different energies like the material energy, spiritual energy. But to begin with, he starts the chapter by saying that we can only do that by hearing the knowledge of Krishna from him. And he's saying that he is the source of everything. He's the like a pearl strung on a thread.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I think you gave me a little bit more than what I wanted. But Krishna is the main. Is essentially, it's a drift or a departure from the previous chapters, where Krishna was speaking more about the jiva. Beginning from 7th chapter, Krishna begins to speak about himself. Krishna speaks about 4 kinds of people who do not surrender to Krishna. So can somebody tell me one so we can have different devotees volunteer. So if you can tell me one name. Kokila Mataji?
People who are atheist, Prabhu, they do not surrender to Krishna.
People who are atheists. Very good. Thank you. Bhakti Vinod Prabhu?
It's the Mudas who are just working so hard to get to satisfy the senses.
Very good. The materialists, the Muras. Okay. Chaitanya Prabhu?
Naradamas.
Okay. Naradamas were the atheists, so Kokila Mataji spoke it, but yeah, the Naradamas. Okay. Let's see. Anantacharya Prabhu?
Asuram bhavam ashrataha.
Very good.
Demoniac mentality people.
Very good. Asurikashram bhavam ashrita. And the 4th kind? Shaktiman Prabhu?
Mental speculators, Prabhu.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Speculators, mental speculators.
The what?
Speculate. Who the ones who speculate.
The mental speculators.
Yeah.
Mental speculators. Yes, yes, very good. And Krishna also speaks about 4 kinds of people that do surrender to him. So if you could tell me the type and as a bonus, an example of a personality who comes in that type. Okay, Praveen Prabhu.
Somebody who is some devotees who are looking for financial gains or who are stressed by material situation.
Okay, so these are the Artharthi. Do you know an example?
Dhruva Maharaj.
Dhruva Maharaj, very good. Rupa Raghunath Prabhu.
Jigyasu, who are looking for knowledge of our absolute truth.
Those who are inquisitive. And example?
Not sure, Prabhuji. If something comes, I'll speak up.
Okay, so the sages of Naimisharan, yeah?
Yes.
They come in that.
Sure.
Very good. Ajit Krishna Prabhu.
So the Gyanis, Prabhu.
The Gyanis. And the example of that would be?
Example would probably be the 4 Kumars.
The 4 Kumaras. Sukdev Goswami is 4 Kumaras. There are examples of that. And the 4th, Bhaktivinoda Prabhu.
Arthur, the distressed people, like example Gajendra.
The example Gajendra. Very good. Now, in addition to so when Krishna speaks about these 4, he considers one of them to be specially dear to him. So can somebody tell me which one and why does Krishna consider them to be dear to him? Okay, somebody who hasn't tried so far. Somebody new? Vajranath Prabhu, would you like to try?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah. I mean, it's who's in full knowledge, who always remembers Krishna and pure devotional service.
Yes, yes. So of the 4, Krishna is specifically glorifies the Gyanis because they are in full knowledge. He calls all 4 of them magnanimous. And actually, if you step back and see Krishna's description of these 8 kinds of people, the 4 who surrender and the 4 who do not surrender, he calls the 4 who surrender Sukritino and the 4 who do not surrender Dushkritino. And the acharyas say that Krishna deliberately uses the word Kirtino. Kirtino means pious or devotional because they all have the ability to become devotees. The only difference is that where do they turn to? The Sukritino turn to Krishna, the Dushkritino turn away from Krishna. But if they get the mercy of a devotee, they can become a Sukritino. So Krishna describes them with an adjective which has the same root word. Now, in addition to the 4 that do not surrender, Krishna talks about 2 more kinds of people that surrender but not to Krishna. So can anybody tell me who these 2 are, or just tell me one and then somebody can tell me the second. Let's see. Rai Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So I have the worshippers of the Devdas, demigods, and the worshippers of the impersonal Brahman.
Very good. And can somebody tell me, how does Krishna describe these two people? Kokila Mataji?
Oh, I just raised my hand before, I didn't lower it. But I can try.
That's okay. Let's give Ranga Mataji a chance. Ranga Mataji, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. So, as a Paramatma in everybody's heart, he strengthens that belief they have on the demigods, so that they are going back to them because they're not interested in coming to Krishna because they have material.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Praveen Prabhu.
Krishna says these are not so intelligent.
Who does he say are
Jiva.
not so intelligent?
The one who worship the demigods.
Okay. So he calls them as Alpamedisha, as not so intelligent. And Ranjita Mataji, what does Krishna call those who are worshipping the Brahman?
Oh, okay. First one for the Devdas, I would like to answer one more point, Prabhuji. Mostly they are for the fruitive desire. Mostly they worship demigods to satisfy their fruitive desire. They don't have any proper goal. After that, then they might go back. They won't worship. And Brahman are those who are like basically they're impersonalist. Sorry.
Okay. And
They're impersonalist and
do you know what does Krishna call them?
Mayavadis.
Okay, I think you're speculating right now.
No
worries. No worries. Gayatri Mataji?
In verse 24, he calls them Abudhaya, which translates as less intelligent persons.
Yes, Abudhaya means no intelligence. Means no. So the demigod worshipper, he calls them as Alpamedishas, limited intelligence, or small intelligence. Alpha means small, and Abudhaya means no intelligence. So he's a little bit more critical of the impersonalists because they work harder. The demigod worshippers at least are having material enjoyment. The impersonalists, they work harder for little gain, which is also not permanent. So he calls them Abudhaya. And then Krishna talks about a seventh kind of a person towards the end of the chapter. Does anybody remember? Bhaktivinoda Prabhu?
I think is it the Mokshakami Bhakta who's desiring liberation?
Very good. So Mokshakrita. And Krishna is more magnanimous towards them. He's not really critical because they're devotees, but they have desire for liberation. So these categories are basically Yoga Mishra Bhaktas. And that is the segue into the 8th chapter, because the 8th chapter is essentially about the Yoga Mishra Bhaktas. And towards the end of the 7th chapter, Krishna also introduces some new terms, which basically Arjun then asks for clarification from the 8th chapter. So I'm going to stop now. I hope you have had time, the respective teams, to prepare your sections. And if you can go as usual, if you can, once one person can speak for about 3 to 5 minutes to summarize that section. And then after that, I will try and give an overview. and time permitting, we'll have Q&A after that. Okay, so over to you. So group one.
Vamsi Prabhu, are you there? Okay. I think he is not there in the Zoom meeting. Ram Tulsi Mataji, you want to go ahead, or I can then go ahead and summarize?
I'm here, Prabhu. Just do you want to do it, or you have my notes there? I mean, you want to do it? You can do it.
No, go ahead, Mataji. You have created the notes.
Okay, so then Krishna in chapter, the first, we had to do the verses from 1 to 8, and Krishna answers Arjun's 7 questions from 1 to 4, because Arjun asked Krishna these 8 questions. Well, like what Krishna started in chapter 7. So the Brahman, the Adhyatma, Adibhuta, Adidaiva, and Adiyagya. And Krishna briefly answers Arjun's first 7 questions as follows. Brahman is the indestructible living entity. Adhyatma is the living entity's nature. Karma is the reactions that force the living entity to take a material body in this world. Adibhuta is the presider over the ever-changing material nature. Number 5, he who presides over all demigods and their planets is the Adidevata, the universal form of the Lord. And 6 and 7, Krishna is the super soul, is within everyone's heart, and is the Adiyagya, the Lord of all sacrifices. And then question 8, remembering Krishna. So from 8.5 to 8, remembering Krishna at the time of death. So since Krishna says, actually, since one obtains whatever one remembers at the time of death, Krishna recommends that Arjun meditate on him, dedicate his activities to him, and always remember him and thus attain him. Do you want me to go through each text, Prabhu? Because I did that also, but I don't know if that was enough for you.
And the summary is good enough, Mataji. This is
Was
great.
that okay? Okay, because I did each text also, so.
Okay, no, we don't. I think summation is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much. Excellently done. Let's move on to group 2.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So we got from text 8.9 till 8.16. 8.9 starts, Krishna tells, the process of thinking about Supreme while meditating upon him. Here, actually, we need to understand who is the absolute, who is Supreme. We need to understand that he's the absolute, he's Swarat, and he's not impersonal, and he's not wired. That Lord is Purusha, a person. Lord is a Kavi. He knows about his past, present, and future. His Achintya, his inconceivable, that his energy is beyond the material world. And from 8.10, 13, these verses explain, how to, at the time of death, how one should fix his mind on the Supreme. The earlier Krishna gives many process. There are like many people who are practicing yoga, and that first thing is like here Krishna explains about Satchakra yoga, these Bhakti yoga and Ashtanga yoga. So Satchakra yogas are those people who concentrate on 6 chakras. They mainly concentrate on Om syllable, and they maintain celibacy, and they work very hard to attain this stage. But they are impersonalist because they concentrate on impersonal Brahman, and they desire to merge into impersonal Brahman. And then Ashtanga yoga. Here actually Prabhupada mentioned about Pratyahara, where one withdraws his senses to fix his, withdraws all the senses from the material world to concentrate on the Supreme. And then the best way is the Bhakti yoga, where all the this is the best process, because where one fixes his mind on Supreme, and then all the senses are used to to please Krishna. So automatically the senses are being controlled. Om Krishna and Lord Om Brahman and Lord Krishna are non-different, but Om is the impersonal sound of Krishna, impersonal sound of Krishna, and whereas Hare Krishna Mahamantra contains Om, and Hare Krishna mantra is a complete form of Krishna, and one who quits his body by saying Hare Krishna Mahamantra would definitely go back to Krishna's abode, and they would never come. And 14 to 16, it explains the final destination for the destination attained by unalloyed devotees who serve the Supreme in Bhakti Yoga. Earlier, Krishna mentions different processes of liberation like karma, jnana, and hatha yoga, but they might fall down. Like the best example of hatha yoga is like Vishwamitra. It has only some part of bhakti, but the pure bhakti yoga has no mixtures of karma, jnana, or hatha yoga, because they always regularly and tries to please Krishna, and they go back to Krishna by serving him, by pleasing him, and they never come back to the material world. So that was
Okay. Thank you very much. So you did an excellent job. I think these set of verses are, they can pack a lot of information, essentially the essence of the chapter. So thank you for summarizing it for us, digesting it nicely and summarizing. Well done. Let's move to group 3.
Hare Krishna, Babaji. The group 3, it is from 8.17 till 8.22. The topic is comparing the material and spiritual world, and also the glories of the supreme abode, which is the Goloka Vrindavana. In the material world, there are numerous planets like highest to lowest level, Brahma Loka, Indra Loka, Chandra Loka, and also Adha Loka, which is the lower planets. Prabhupada mentioned in the purport of 8.16 that with the practice of Panchagni Vidya, one can attain Brahma Loka, which is one of the higher planets. But if one does not cultivate Krishna consciousness in that Brahma Loka, then he will again return back to this material space and continue this cycle of death, disease. So, to bring this context, Krishna introduced the timeline of Brahma, like to know the supreme position and the relativity of person's time with the supreme's time. Brahma's one day, a kalpa, is equivalent to like 4 yugas. So he tried to bring that analogy, like Brahma being the part of a Brahma Loka, he takes like his timeline is so long. We are mere human beings, so one day of Brahma is equivalent to 311 trillion 40 billion earth years. So Brahma being as he is also part of this cycle where he comes back to the material space, even if he, so we are just mere human beings, so we'll be also dragged. So unless we are purely into Krishna consciousness, we are bound to come back to this material space. So his concept was like even Brahma couldn't, so how human beings, so they need to practice to be in that stage. Hence, the best planet, which is the Brahma Loka in the material space, still is subject to the law of material nature. That was the concept he wanted to introduce. During this cycle, if a living entity is somewhat blessed with a human life, he should utilize the opportunity to dedicate his life towards Krishna so that he can get direct access to the spiritual planet. He don't have to go to these higher planets eventually sequentially, so that he doesn't return back. In this human life, he is focusing on Krishna consciousness, then he can bypass all these higher planets in the material space and directly go to the spiritual space. So then and also unlike the manifestation and annihilation of human life, with Brahma's day and light, Krishna's superior energy is unaffected. That's why because of Krishna's energy, he has the like the three types of energies, like the internal, marginal, and external energy. The internal energy are called the Antaranga Shakti or the Chit Shakti, referred to as the superior energy of the Krishna, due to which the abode of Krishna, the Golaka Vrindavana, is kind of the termination point for all living entities. Because of his supreme energy, the living entities are not coming back again to the material space. He has that power, that energy. Then
Okay, very good, Prabhu. Thank you. Yeah, I think you expressed the points. It would help if you timed yourself, just so that you know that you can just within 3 to 5 minutes. But you did a good job in getting across all the important points, and you elaborated also. So thank you, and wanted to thank everybody who jointly worked and did an excellent job in summarizing the chapter. So I'm going to just give a quick overview of the chapter. And
Uji,
I think we
group
have
four,
group four also.
Group 4.
4 groups.
Oh, my apologies. Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay, group 4 of verse 8.23 to 8.28. So in these verses, Krishna talks about how should Jiva leave the body so that they don't have to come back to the material world. Prabhupada in purport writes that for Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, and Hatha Yogi, they will have to leave their body in the right auspicious time, situation like during the daytime, in the presence of light or fire, fortnight of the waxing of the moon, etc. Then they don't have to come to the material world and will get the chance to enter Brahma Jyoti. Only very advanced yogis, however, in this area can meet these requirements deliberately. However, unsuccessful yogis who passes during smoke, nighttime, fortnight of the waning moon, they will be elevated to the moon planet where they will stay about 10,000 years according to demigod calculation, enjoying samarasa, but eventually they will have to come back to the material world. In short, living body, when there is light in the presence, then the jiva do not come back, and when there is darkness, the jivas come back to the material world. But for the devotees, every moment in Krishna consciousness is auspicious. Krishna says that devotees should not worry about fulfilling any of the above mentioned requirements and should only focus on being unattached in material affairs and do everything in Krishna consciousness with Yukta Vairagya. Devotees are protected by the lotus feet of Krishna in this world, and once they leave the body, they will be transferred to the spiritual planets where they will continue their service to the Supreme Lord eternally, which is guaranteed by devotional service. Also, Krishna further stresses that when devotional service is performed, all the benefits of performing all other austerities and sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas is already awarded to the devotees. Prabhupada in the purport says that different ashramas has to perform their prescribed austerities or sacrifices, which is so difficult for this age. Like brahmachari begging for guru and fasting unless guru allows to eat, vanaprastha living in forest, dressing in trees barks, not saving, etc. And depending on the level of their advancement, they enter heavenly planets or Brahma Jyoti or Vaikuntha planets. Whereas devotees can immediately be transferred to the spiritual sky by performing devotional service onto the lotus feet of Krishna. So devotees should try to perfect their devotional service under the guidance of Guru, Vaishnava association, and read Bhagavad Gita and try to understand Lord Krishna better. And when devotees hear more of Krishna from Vaishnava association, then devotees naturally start to completely fall in love with Krishna and will be eligible to be transferred to the Goloka Vrindavan and after leaving the body.
Very good. My apologies for missing you. Thank you. Excellent summary. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the chapter. Each of the group has given us a summary of the sections, and I'll try and stitch it together. So the 8th chapter is considered to be a bit of a detour so if you look at the 7th chapter and when we look at the 9th chapter, we'll see that they are very, very similar in the sense that it appears that the 9th chapter is following the 7th chapter. Similar construction. In the 7th chapter, Krishna speaks about how he can be seen everywhere. Same thing in 9th chapter. 7th chapter, Krishna speaks about how he is perceived by his devotees. Same thing in the 9th chapter. We saw the same thing in the 3rd and the 5th chapter. Very similar chapters, and the 4th chapter comes in between. It seems to be a detour. Same thing we see over here, that the 8th chapter is a bit of a detour, and essentially it is expanding on some important points that Krishna wants to make before he continues with the conversation. It's like two people are talking, and the person says, "By the way, just want to expand on this," and expands on it, and then goes ahead with the conversation. So. Okay, so Arjun, based on Krishna's the points that Krishna made towards the end of the previous chapter, Arjun asks Krishna 7 questions. Right? He asks, "What is Brahman? What is Adhyatma? And what is Karma?" So, what is Arjun essentially asking? That is Brahman Jiva or the Lord? Then in terms of Adhyatma, Atma means self. He's saying that is the self composed of the senses or the subtle elements? And Karma, this is what are activities. Now what we'll notice is that there is contextually there's a bit of a depth in the questions that are asked. And Krishna does not always answer the question the way that it is asked, but he answers it in a way that is helpful to Arjun. Right? So these 3 questions are essentially pertaining to the Jiva. These 3 questions, Brahman, Adhyatma, and Karma. And Krishna says, Jiva is Brahman. Right? Now we know in the past we have said Brahman is also Krishna's impersonal energy. Brahman can even refer to Krishna, but here Krishna is saying Brahman is Jiva, because the point he's making is that you're not the body but the soul. Brahman essentially means one that is transcendental, not material. Says that Jiva is Brahman. Then what is Adhyatma? Adhyatma, he says, is Swabhav, the eternal nature of the
living entity.
Jiva. I think somebody needs to mute them, so some crosstalk. Thank you. So, so Krishna says Adhyatma is the Swabhav. The eternal nature of the Jiva is Jivere Swarupoy, Krishna Nityadas. Conditioned Jiva, the Swabhav is as it is dictated by the 3 modes. But here Krishna is talking about the nature of the eternal nature of the Jiva. And then Arjun asks, what are activities? But Krishna answers that what is the consequence of activities? So he says karma is that which results in the creation of a material body, right? Which is the cause of the Jiva taking repeated birth. Then 3 more questions asked by Arjun: Adibhuta, Adideva, and Adiyagya. So the Sanskrit word Adi means over and above, in control of, or superior, right? So when they say Adibhuta, who is over the Bhuta is the material, who's over the material energy. Adideva is who's over the Devas, who's the enjoyer of the Yagyas, right? So he's asking these 3 questions. These 3 questions refer to the personality of Godhead. And Krishna says that Adibhuta is the external energy of Krishna. Adideva is the Vishwarupa, and the Paramatma is the Adiyagya. And he's also in this, he's also giving 3 ways to meditate on Krishna. And the 7th question is know you at the time of, how to know you at the time of death, which essentially is establishing a relationship between the Jiva and the Lord. Right? So that's the purport of the question. So there's the Jiva, there is the Lord, and then he says, how can the Jiva know the Lord at the time of death? What's the relationship between the two? And then Krishna basically speaks the rest of the chapter, answering the 7th question. Right? First 6 questions he answers quickly, and then he expands onto the 7th question. So this is the essence of the chapter, the art of dying. It's a morbid subject, but it's the ultimate reality. And Krishna, as usual, deals with a lot of finesse. So he talks about, so these two verses are fairly famous. That in 8.5, in 8.6 he talks about the general principle. Right? Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyanta kalevaram tam tamevati konteya siddhartha bhavata, that the principle is that whatever state of being one remembers at the time of death, that he will attain. Right? Prabhupada gives the example of Bharat Maharaj thinking of a deer when he died. So that is the general principle. And then he gives the specific example, and he gives that in the previous verse in 8.5, the Antakale Chamameva Smarana Mukta Kalevaram Yaprati Samad Bhavam Yati Nasti Atra Asamshaya. That at the end of the life, if you think of me, you will attain my nature. And so, this is essentially the summary of the instructions of Krishna, that what you will die, the state of mind that you will die in, that determines your next birth. So the chapter essentially is constructed around 3 comparisons that Krishna makes: the results of remembering Krishna, and the results of remembering something other than Krishna. Then what is the process of remembering Krishna versus something else? And what is the result of it? How does one actually remember Krishna at the time of death? Right? So he is contrasting Bhakti Yoga and Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So as we had seen, Krishna was talking, what was being explained, that Krishna is talking about the Shat Chakra Yoga. So if you look at all the verses in this chapter, they will come in these three categories. We also will notice that how Krishna's instructions are progressing. And if you look at the trend, that initially Krishna asked Arjun that you do your duty and then you enjoy the results of the fruits. Right? That was the first instruction. Then he says that you do your duty and surrender the results. Second set of instructions. Then he says that you remember me and do your duty. This is what Krishna is instructing now. And then finally Krishna will say, just remember me. Don't worry about it. Later on, Krishna says, just remember me. Don't worry about anything else. So we see how Krishna is gradually taking Arjun and us to subsequent levels of purification. So this theme of remembering Krishna is is core, one of the core lessons that is given by this chapter. So wanted to share a pastime with you. It's from the Puranas, and also want to let you know that the pastime is described a little differently in the Bhagavatam. And sometimes we see it's explained as Kalpabhed. That same pastime is described differently in scriptures, because different days of Brahma, there is slight difference, different personalities, slight different details. So this is famous as the Bahulavan pastime. And in the Gajendra Moksha pastime of the Bhagavatam, you remember there is a crocodile that catches the foot of Gajendra. And the crocodile, then it is revealed that the crocodile is actually a Gandharva named Huhu, who was cursed by Devala Muni. That's how it's described in Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 4th chapter. In the Puranas, slightly differently, it says that once Pipalya Muni, he went to Swarga, and at that time the Gandharvas were dancing for the pleasure of Indra and the Devas, and Pipalya Muni and Narad Muni went there, and their exalted stages. So everybody immediately got up and offered obeisances, with the exception of the Gandharvas, who continued to dance. So Pipalya Muni got angry, and then he cursed the two leaders of the Gandharvas, that was Huhu and Aha, well, strange names. Well, he said that we have no manners. So he curses them. So he curses Huhu to become a crocodile, Haha, he curses to become a lion who appears in Bahulavan. So then Huhu and Haha, very politely, they say that, fine, you cursed us, but you're also a sage. So you can look within the mind of people. So look within us and see what was actually transpiring while we were dancing. So then Pipalya Muni, he kind of then looks into the past and looks within the mind of Huhu and Aha, and then he notices that even though externally they were dancing, internally they had stopped dancing, they gave obeisances, and then they continued to dance. And then Pipalya Muni feels very, at least in the Quran, he gets very angry at himself and curses himself and curses some other people also. But the pastime I'm sharing is to show that how can one work and meditate on Krishna. So when Krishna says meditate on me, it does not say give up your work. Right? So the understanding is that one continues to work while meditating on Krishna. So what's the practical implication of it? That one does the work to the best of their ability, with the understanding that Krishna is empowering them to do work, and also with the understanding that whatever the results of the work is coming is by the mercy of Krishna. Right? So it's not, so Arjun is a classic example, right? He followed this example of fighting in the battle while meditating on Krishna. So he fought to the best of his ability, but fully surrendered to the instructions of Krishna and detached from the results, understanding that it is Krishna's mercy. Right? So we can also do that, right? We can start a day by chanting. That's setting us in with the understanding that everything that is going to happen is by the mercy of Krishna. We can continue the day and have things good and bad happening, understanding that Krishna's mercy. And then we can end the day by like we are ending today, by discussing Krishna's pastimes, reading Prabhupada's books. And that essentially is what the whole science of working while meditating on Krishna, right? So this is the the essence of text 7, where Krishna says that you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, right? And Prabhupada makes this point that this is for devotees, that we think of Krishna's two-handed form, or we think of the deity in the temple, or we think of the deity that we worship, and in this way we continue. Okay, so moving on. Now Krishna begins to describe the process of leaving the body. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the chapter is contrasting the Yoga Mishra Bhakta with the Ananya Bhaktas. The focus is on the practice of Yoga Mishra Bhakta. So, we already saw this in the 6th chapter, that the process is long, success is not guaranteed, chances of failure is high, one loses most of the progress that is made, and the destination is Brahman. So, one of the acharyas commenting on it says that even the asuras get this destination. Gives the example of Aghasur, that in Vrindavan, when Krishna killed Aghasur, the snake demon, then the cowherd boys witnessed the soul of Aghasur coming out from the top of his head, which essentially is the result of Satchakra Yoga. That the practitioner, after long practice, is able to elevate the soul to the top of the head, and then the soul goes to the Brahman. So the destination that Krishna is giving to the asuras is the destination that comes after long practice, risky endeavor, and low chances of success. So even though it's a valid path, but there is this implicit understanding that it is a lot of effort for little gain. Right? Brahman is transcendental, it's not material, but the point is that Aghasur got it, and he was inimical to Krishna. So this is Krishna talking about the Yoga Mishra Bhaktas. Now Krishna will contrast that with those who follow Bhakti. Right? In verse 14, he says, Ananya chetah satatam yomam smriti nityasaha tasyaham su labhapartha nityuktasya yogina. So here Krishna goes out of his way to characterize Bhakti as sulabha. Sulabha is, he says, very easy. This is the only place in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna says that Bhakti is easy. Generally, he will say that it is fast, it is more accessible, it is superior. But here he wants to for contrast, he makes this point that Bhakti is Sulabha. Chapter 8, verse 14. The reason Bhakti is Sulabha is because once you start practicing it, it becomes like second nature to you. I was hearing a lecture by Ramdra Sarup Prabhu, and he was sharing that initially when he started going to the temple, he was an impersonalist, and he thought that that's what ISKCON was all about. It was basically about impersonalism. Now, impersonalists, they're fine with deity worship because they consider it as a means to an end. That you worship the deity and one day you become the deity, right? You worship Narayan and one day Narayan was me, you become Narayan. So he said, I was fine with all of that. But then one day he said, I was eating prasadam, and another devotee turned to him and says that, you know that you will never become Krishna. And he said that was like a big, reckoning to him. That here he had all this prior conceptions that the whole process is to become Krishna, and this person is basically telling you will never become Krishna. So he said, I don't want anything to do with this Hare Krishnas. He stopped coming to the temple, went home. And then he says that by that time I'd already taken to chanting. And I could not give up chanting. So because he was already so addicted to chanting, transitively he was addicted to Vaishnavas and to deity worship. So he says, reluctantly I went back to the temple. And then he said, gradually I gave up my impersonalist tendencies. So that's the nature of bhakti. All of us are practicing devotees, and many times we basically question ourselves or question our gurus that my chanting is offensive and I've been chanting for a long time. Am I making progress? Now, I don't advise that you do it, but I can bet that if any one of you gives up chanting, then you will not be able to get through the day. It becomes like air. You're breathing the air, it's all around you, you don't see it, you don't even realize you're breathing, but it's sustaining you. And when will you miss the air the most? When the air is taken away from you. Then each and every second becomes a century. Same thing with chanting. We are chanting, it's become our second nature, just like breathing. And the day we stop chanting, then that day will be almost impossible for us to go through. That's the beauty of bhakti. That's why Krishna says it is sulabha. Because you don't cultivate bhakti. Bhakti is already there. All that you're doing is you're manifesting the bhakti. Right? So then Krishna moves on, and then he starts comparing the destination. So in the verse 15, he introduces two concepts, right? He talks about dukhalyam ashashvatam. This is the material world, and he'll expand upon it in verses 16, 17, 18, 19. So he says that it is dukhalyam, misery. There is a misery because repeated birth and death. That janma mrityu jara vyadhi. And even though there are many miseries, but the misery of birth and death are the ones that through which they are the fountainhead of all the other miseries. When you take birth, you start suffering, and then you spend your life basically under the misery of death. That as one takes birth, one begins to die, and ultimately the death is final. And second is ashashvatam, and that's where Krishna talks about Brahmana Punarloka, everything from the topmost planet Brahma to the lowermost planet Patal Lok. Talks about the duration of life, that Brahma lives for 311 trillion, 40 billion years, but even he dies. And the humans, compared to humans, Brahma's life is fantastically long. And for him, human life is like a blink of an eye. But nevertheless, Brahma's eye is like half a breath to Mahavishnu, right? Which gives us a sense of perspective. And then Krishna in the 15th chapter also says Mamapetya, and he talks about the spiritual world. That there's another world, and he expands on this in verses 20 and 222, and contrasts it. That is temporary, this is permanent. That is a place of misery, and this is a place of pleasure, right? So the choice is yours. So he gave two different paths. He gave Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and he gave Ananya Bhakti. He gave two different destinations, right? And then he says that choice is yours, not much of a choice, right? So Krishna gives further details in terms of the time of leaving of the body, that the Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they should be going at an appropriate time of the auspicious time of the day, when there is light as opposed to darkness. When the Uttarayan time, the 6 months like starts after Makar Sankranti, and during the fortnight where the moon is rising, the waxing moon, all four have to be met. If any of the four are not met, then the destination is not reached. And the devotees, he says, they don't care. They're not worried about this, right? So in the Ramayana, we have the example of Jatayu, that Jatayu, he saw Ravan kidnapping Sita. He fought with Ravan to protect Sita. But Ravan was too powerful for him, and essentially he mortally wounds him. So from the perspective of Jatayu, he could not complete his service. And his service was that protect Sita Devi. And he failed in that service. But Lord Ram gave him the position of Dasharath. So the glory was in the effort, that he executed his bhakti perfectly. Whether it was successful or not does not matter. If he had saved Sita, he would still have gotten the same destination that he got, even though he did not save Sita. Right? So the Lord is a person. He does not look at rules. He looks at the underlying emotions. In the Puranas, there's a story about the Brahman and the prostitute, and briefly, it's about that there was a river, and one shore of the river in the morning, a Brahmana used to come and take his bath. On the other shore, at the same time, a prostitute used to come and take her bath. And the Brahmana would look at the prostitute and think that that's such a degraded person and such a sinful person. The prostitute would look at the Brahmana and mentally give obeisances to him, such an exalted person. And when with time both of them died, the prostitute went back to Godhead and the Brahmana went to Yamraj. The Brahmana said, what's going on? Why am I here? And Yamraj said, that's what you were always thinking about, even though you were performing all your Sangya Vandanams and all that, but your meditation was on the prostitute, even though it was in a negative way. That's what you were meditating on. And he said, look, the prostitute, she's sitting on the Viman and going back, because her meditation was on the spiritual qualities that you had. So the potency of bhakti is that even if it is performed accidentally, unknowingly, it still awards results. So conclusion, the last verse is Krishna summarizes that Vedeshu yagyesu tapasu chaiva daneshu yad punya phalam pratishtham atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti cha. That a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical or fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So Krishna says this verse to give further assurance that one may be reading this chapter and thinking that, okay, I perform bhakti, my destination may be supreme, but I may lead a miserable life. Because what is the result of performing austerities and giving charity? One gets elevated into the higher modes. One enjoys material happiness or fame or the pleasures of being known as knowledgeable. So one may say, I'm doing bhakti and I may get deprived of all this. And Krishna says, no, you will get this and that. Right? So it's sometimes they advertise these in the television, they have the channels and they have the specials. So if you buy this right now, you will get this mixie, and along with that, you will get another mixie, and you will get a spoon and a bowl and a spatula. So they have all these goodies thrown in just so that you can buy it at the time. So this is Krishna advertising bhakti. Krishna is the perfect salesman. He's saying, not only will you get the supreme destination, but everything else that everybody else is aspiring for, you will get that also. So, who would not perform bhakti? And that's the end of the 8th chapter. So, I have actually run out of time. So we will take the question and answers at the beginning of the next class, but I wanted to leave with the groups for the 9th chapter. Let me see. I stopped sharing accidentally. Let me share again. And of course, I will share this deck with you. And there also we have the division. So these are the 4 groups. Chapter 9 is it's a little philosophically heavy chapter. Probably one of the 9 and 12. There are probably 2 chapters. Other chapters are very, very straightforward. That's the nature of bhakti. Very easy, not much. 13th chapter, we'll see things become a little complicated. And earlier in the first 6 chapters, we saw, we were trying to get around, but the middle 6 chapters, they just flow very easily. In the 9th chapter, Krishna does speak a little bit of heavy philosophy there. 10 and 11th are they're just descriptive chapters. 10th has a Chatushloki, of course, but they're mostly descriptive. So these are the 4 groups. So as usual, if you can take time out to prepare. And I think everybody is getting a very good grasp on how to present, being concise and relevant, and summation, the summarizing. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he glorified this quite at the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says that the essence of eloquence is brevity, and speaking the most in the least number of words. Now, we can't be Krishnadas Kaviraj, but we can definitely aspire to be more like that. Okay, so let me end over here. And as I said, that we will take questions in the next week. So please note your questions, and we will start next week with question and answers on the 8th chapter. Thank you very much. So we'll end over here.
Patitana Vaishnavya Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Jai.